Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I have a brief paragraph here to introduce you. Then uh, uh, I think, have you already seen it, I guess. So I guess I'm telling this to the other folks. So Charlene is a New Jersey native and a powerful woman of faith with a consistent record of fiercely advocating for racial, immigrant, economic, and social justice. She challenges leaders and institutions to better unite our social movements and to work towards dismantling systems of hate and oppression. As a firm believer that justice begins at our intersections, she reminds us of the need for Black, Brown, people with different abilities, youth, and poor communities to work closely together to build more power to win on the pressing issues that support the families of New Jersey. Charlene's unique upbringing empowers her to connect with people from all walks of life. She sees the enormous capacity for love people have and values their inherent worth and dignity, motivating those she engages with to take on active roles in the community and political process. Charlene is actively cultivating the leaders of tomorrow who will lead the state of New Jersey and the United States to the beloved community of one hope, of justice, fairness, opportunity, and love. Charlene, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me. I love the fact that I feel like I just traveled all the way up to Vermont during COVID. So this is great.
Yes, it was a quick travel as well.
Exactly.
No more waiting in the airport.
Exactly. No TSA checks. It's great.
So Charlene, we'd love to hear some about your story of how did you get into organizing?
Oh wow. So I think it's just honestly my story of who I am. So I like to say that when I was born, I was automatically put up for adoption. So I went from a hospital in our state capital of Trenton, New Jersey, all the way up to this little town called Hillside, New Jersey, to a foster home. And I like to say that, my mom thought I was so cute, she decided to keep me. So I was lucky enough that I stayed with my mom in the house where she did foster care up until I was probably in about fifth grade. So I grew up in a household that was multiracial, it was multi-faith, and growing up in the house, in retrospect, I understand the uniqueness of my upbringing. But as a kid, like I didn't understand why my sister, like it wasn't a big deal. My sister Nicole was blonde hair, blue eyes. My sister Tina was, she was Puerto Rican. Like it wasn't this big deal to us. But until going to school, even though Hillside is this teeny tiny town, right? It's only about 2.4, 2.8 square miles. It was redlined so badly that our town literally, if you lived on one side of the train tracks, it dictated what your race was. So, believe it or not, when I went to fifth grade, in the school that I had gone to my whole life, that originally was kindergarten through eighth grade, um, it switched to fifth grade school. I didn't know at the time that this had gone all the way up to our New Jersey Supreme Court, that our township had actually been fighting against desegregating our town. So when I showed up at school on this particular day, there's news crews everywhere, and we couldn't understand as kids like what's going on. So we sat in our classroom in a school that was originally predominantly Black. All of a sudden, we had the entire rainbow within our classroom, and there were all these angry parents and everything. And that's when I started to open my eyes about systemic differences, because the kids were like, well, that entire first day, well, my playground doesn't look like this. My playground has all these other things, right? To the point where I had my mom actually drive me across town because I needed to see for myself. And that's when my mom had this conversation with me, like, sweetie, things are different. It's easier for people when they're separate to not get the same exact things. And then just growing up with my entire life story, I've firsthand have experienced what difference it means as a Black woman growing up in America, especially around healthcare. I saw my mother, unfortunately, she had a persistent cough, was going to the doctor, and the doctor never actually diagnosed her with anything, just kept giving her cough syrup until I showed up and really pushed and demanded for them to give her a chest x-ray to find out. For months, she'd been going to the doctor and they've just been ignoring her because she's just this little Black lady saying, hey, I have this cough, until I went in there to find out that she had stage 4 lung cancer and had been ignored. And I ended up eventually losing her. But all throughout my life, I've seen firsthand from our immigrant loved ones that were undocumented that my mother took care of. Just all of these different injustices, and just growing up and seeing these things, I feel like I could not, being the person that I am, growing up in a house where my mother taught us that we speak up for the little guy, we speak up for each other, to not fall into this place of organizing. And I've been doing it for over 10 years, and I've organized people with different abilities. I've organized with at-risk youth, and then with faith communities, which has really been my joy to actually be able to organize within Faith in Action.
Yeah, your experience from growing up and being the experience of being a Black woman, it certainly has, it seems to motivated you around your organizing work. Could you, going off script a little bit, but could you, say a little bit about, like, how did you decide to become an organizer? Like, how does a person decide to become an organizer?
I honestly, I don't think anybody really decides that you want to be an organizer. I think that your story and your struggle brings you to organizing, because you realize in order to make it through this world, you have to fight. And you start to begin to understand that the fight is together. It's not just you. And for some silly reason, people started listening to me when I would stand up and I would shout, or I would say that I think that my first protest actually was in high school. We got extremely upset for two things, which was there wasn't a girls soccer team, and that there were no advanced placement classes in my high school. So we decided to, myself and a couple of friends, we got a group together and we stormed the Board of Ed meeting. And that was our first time having a protest. And guess what? We won. So it set a really bad precedent probably for the rest of the world, for me to start to believe that when I stand up, I can win. And then it just went from one thing to another, to another, to another. And I would say the biggest turning point for me that made me make it a lifelong decision really wasn't that long ago, where I say that all I'm going to do is organize. In this realm, because I had been organizing within the organization that I worked with. I was working with in an organization that provided supports for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and at-risk youth. And I fell into organizing in that space, right? As part of my, it was like my specialty was like the advocacy side of things. And then what ended up happening was in 2016, I had been working in this one particular space, and I had something happen to me that made me just say no more, that all I can do is organize. And that was, I lost my actual son. I gave birth to a little one. And when I did, I had him early. And what I found in that moment when I had my son, that my friend had a son, had a child maybe a month later, same hospital, born early, same time. And the difference in care that we received, they would not even fight to try and keep my son alive. Her daughter just celebrated their fifth birthday. Because they moved mountains. And at that point, I got so engaged with, I'm just not going to sit here. Yes, I'm going to organize for work, but then I started looking for ways to organize around issues that I was deeply invested in. And that's how I stumbled upon Faith in New Jersey. And I was a leader within Faith in New Jersey. And I was on the board, and I was bringing people together in my local county. And then next thing I know, all I wanted to do was spend my spare time with Faith in New Jersey. And slowly but surely, the position of executive director opened up, and I so happened to get it.
Thank you. Well, that actually is a great segue into these next questions. Tell us a little bit about Faith in New Jersey. Where in New Jersey are you all focusing your work, and who do you work with? What are the issues you're currently working on?
So, Faith in New Jersey is a statewide organizing entity. We're the largest within the state of New Jersey. We run on the same model that VIA runs on, the Faith in Action organizing model. So we organize across the state. We have places that we organize that are county-based. So we have county-wide groups, but then we also organize on a state level. So we have 21 counties in New Jersey. We don't have county groups in all 21 counties. We have county groups in forget the count. I want to say maybe like 7 of those counties right now. That will have full boards and everything set up at, but we actually have a base in every single county within New Jersey. And the way that most people plug in that are not within those local organizing counties is on the statewide level for our statewide pushes around policies. Like we passed the independent prosecutor bill that states that you cannot shoot somebody as a police officer and get an investigation by your local prosecutor. It has to be somebody outside of your district. So we're working on, as far as work, we work on some of everything. So we work on immigrant justice. We have a large immigrant base within New Jersey. New Jersey, by the way, is one of the most diverse ethnic organizations, states within the country. So we are very diverse with our immigrant loved ones that lead our work. We've been able to work for what we call fair and welcoming policies, and something that if Vermont has not done, I suggest we got something written by our Attorney General called the Immigrant Trust Directive that ends collaboration with ICE from law enforcement. It's a directive, so our next step is to try and make it to codify it into law, to cover all other places, like schools and whatever else that are sensitive locations. We also work on policing. So we're doing reimagining policing. We're part of the Live Free campaign. So we're using the Bring the Heat organizing model that seeks to, one, start to fire all racist cops, anybody with white supremacy ties. Also to defund and replace the structures within the police department with community-based resources, right? And then also to try and transform and reconstruct policing through hiring, equipment, accountability, and training. We are also working to cover all kids. In New Jersey, there are 80,000 children that do not have medical insurance. So we're fighting to get coverage for all kids, and we hope that will happen next year. One of the things that I am very proud of that we were able to do this year during COVID was able to actually work with an independent donor in order to provide funding for some of our immigrant loved ones that were left out, cruelly carved out of any federal resources. And thanks to them, our immigrant leaders across the state, from the bottom of the state all the way up north, were able to gather almost about $1.5 million in gift cards were able to be given out to our immigrant loved ones across the state, which is just amazing. But it doesn't fall on philanthropy. The government needs to step up. That's just a drop in the bucket in New Jersey. So we're working on a lot of things, as you can tell. We're very busy. We work on whatever it is that comes out of our listening campaigns that's important to our people.
Are there any challenges you might feel that might be particular to New Jersey and your Faith in New Jersey that you all have had to work around?
All right. So I think one of the biggest challenges in New Jersey is that we have this idea that we're really progressive, right? Just on November 4th, we helped to pass a piece of legislation where we were able to release over 2,000 people that have been incarcerated due to COVID. The legislation shaved 8 months off of people's sentences so that they could be released because of this public health crisis. So on the outside, looks like we are super progressive, right? It's a farce. It's not really true. Our progressiveness does not happen without deep committed organizing. We have to organize to get the things that we want. And we really need to push our legislators to do these things, even down to just yesterday. Of course, they announced over the weekend who's been chose for this commission that's going to do like our redistricting. And it was a complete and total political power play of who they selected. They made sure that there was nobody that was selected that really represents the people. They're as diverse as we are. There is not one Black person or Latino on this list of people. It's all politics. So there's this idea that we're progressive, but we have to continue to push and really make people do things. And we also have something called a line ballot system in our voting. We're the only state in the country that has it, that says that if you don't vote, the way the ballot is set up, it's set up to trick you, that only vote for this county line. And if you're not on this county line, you don't win. So that's an uphill battle in political education to really get people to vote off the line by their values.
How have events in the past 8 months impacted or changed the way has changed your organizing strategy?
So COVID happened, which, by the way, I ended up unfortunately having for 2.5 months, which was a bit rough. But I think for everyone, including probably right here in Vermont and across the nation, nobody knew what was COVID was. Everybody got scared, right? Everyone was like, how am I going to take care of me, my family, my loved ones, and then our congregations? How do we take care of each other, right? I think that the biggest move and shift, because we've always been people that organize, right? Like we understand that it's our job to move houses of worship past some, not past, but to do in addition to our service work, but then to also go upstream, right? And to try and figure out what are the systems at play to change it. I think for us as an organization, we actually decided to lean into like, how do we help people, from giving out the cards, from helping to connect people to, we've been doing masks for the people. So we've been giving out masks and sanitizer in the hardest areas in New Jersey. I don't know if most people know that actually our New Jersey is one of the hardest hit places for COVID, right in the region that actually that I grew up in. So we did that, but then also the digital divide is real. We were really challenged because a lot of the counties that we have our county groups within, had a disconnect with their digital needs. Like they just couldn't get online. We couldn't transition everybody automatically into Zoom. So there was a lot of using like WhatsApp to reach out to people, telephone calls, text messaging. And I will have to say that Outvote is amazing. If you have not used it, use it, use it, use it. So it's been really useful. And actually one of the things that we're going to be doing is going back from our civic engagement and looking at all the people we talked to through Outvote, and then going back, re-engaging them, and then doing listening campaigns virtually through Outvote and telephone calls.
Is there any additional advice you'd like to share with our leaders, clergies, and allies? Any sort of advice?
Advice. So I think that we need to remember, because I always say that justice is rooted in our relationships and begins at our intersections, right? So for me, that's really saying that we really need to lean into our relationships, and now more than ever, making sure that we're talking to those that we might not necessarily always engage, and really building strong relationships. That's the only way we're going to get through these things. And then also thinking about what does it mean to be intersectional? We're going into 2021, and I'm telling my people, gloves off. Like we need to be intersectional, and we need to be bold and be bold about the things that we ask for and that we demand. And we're not going to be able to do that if we're not intersectional in our movement, if we're not looking to see like what it is that we can do together, because we all belong to each other, right? Across difference. One of the things that really breaks my heart in New Jersey that I see often is that our county jails house our immigrant loved ones that are being detained on one side of the jail, and then the other side of the jail are people that are being detained for other reasons. Like I don't know, from what would be considered criminal reasons, right? But then we have protests that are outside this county jail, and you're only demanding for half of that jail to be released. Like, that's not an intersectional movement. The call is to abolish the carceral state. It's not to abolish it for some. It's the same system. When we're talking about abolish ICE, we're talking about all of it. We're talking about policing and ICE. It's the same. It's just two different sides of the coin. And to build something from our own imaginations that actually loves our communities and loves us in a way that's necessary for us to really build a beloved community.
I usually like to end interviews with words of hope. Could you please share some inspiring words or thoughts of hope for us here in Vermont?
So I will say exactly what I said on the day of the election. On the election, I woke up so nervous. I was anxious, and as organizing, I was tired, right? And then I was looking around and looking at people's Facebook and social media, and it was like this ripple of just pins and needles, and then it just rippled out, obviously, and it's still going on, especially with what we've seen play out in DC just yesterday. But what I believe is that every one of us, especially everyone that's on this call that's showing up for justice, I believe we're blessed to be in this fight together. I believe that, actually, I am reminded that we are all made for this time. And I truly believe we are all more than enough for what's before us.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today all the way from New Jersey.
Thank you for having me. Have a great one, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Charlene.